the disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray. The other Gospels, Jesus says to volunteer the lesson. It said, sit down, I'll teach you the Lord's Prayer. In Luke's Gospel, it said, teach us to pray. The disciples asked Jesus to teach them how to pray. Testament. The other Gospels, John was encouraged, very important. Sit down. Not always easier to distinguish. In Luke's Gospel, prophet draws his or her cause. Jesus is not providing destiny. It's got to be coming out of Jesus, not on my knowledge. Not always easier to distinguish. We'll start with this story. Something not trying to know, but listening to an interview with radio. Jesus, they interviewed the woman. This really is preached in the San Francisco. His deeply committed to stopping climate change. She was traveling the country to preach something in San Francisco. So in the end of the year, she says, you only come from San Francisco, very liberal place, and you see how the game works there. She says, what's this little big old apartment? Or in Alabama? She had a good answer. She says, you know, the sense that anyone out there, whatever I am speaking on the gospel in Alabama, hear me. As soon as I slip into ideology, they turn me off. See, since sincere people hear Jesus, they hear the gospels, they get turned off by ideology. And now what's complicated is this. A lot of times inside of ideology, there are a lot of important truths. When you look at our ideological, you look at almost all social justice movements, there's a lot of stuff that's correct. Sometimes just because something's politically correct, people turn it off. And they can. But sometimes it's not just politically correct, it's correct. And see, that's the tragedy. Because if it's coming because it's politically correct, the ideology of the left or the ideology of the right, people can and will turn it off. Even if it's true. Things like Greenpeace. There's a lot of depth and truth in Greenpeace, but it's an ideology. Actually, with students, one of the things we really try to work on, preparing people for the priesthood, when are you coming out of ideology? And when are you coming out of Jesus? And it's really hard. It's really hard. But it's so important. As this woman said, sincere people hear the gospel. But a lot of sincere people can turn off real important truths because they're cloaked with political correctness and ideology. Okay. Fourthly, a prophet is committed to nonviolence. If you've ever seen this movie, and if you haven't, see it. It's the story of these Trappist monks who were martyred in Algeria in 1996, called Of Gods and Men. It's a true story. It's true to the smallest details. They even try to make the actors look like the actual people. But the abbot of that monastery, all of whom were martyred, you have his diaries and so on. He was a remarkable man. So they were being threatened by Al Qaeda. On Christmas Eve, Al Qaeda come in with machine guns, and they threatened the monks. And you know what the abbot's response was? He said, now we need to be completely disarmed. In the face of being armed, we need to be completely disarmed. Daniel Berrigan had one of the good lines on that. In the face of violence and so on, we become less violent. I once heard this line of Cardinal George in Chicago. I'm not quoting him because it's an oblate, but I'll sleep by that. Somebody asked him once, they said, Cardinal said, what is the value of pure pacifists? Dorothy Day, Daniel Berrigan, some of these people who say, no guns, no violence, no policemen, no soldiers. They said, that's completely unrealistic. You can't have a society without soldiers. You can't have a society without policemen. And they won't function without guns. So what's the value of a pacifist? Cardinal George had a good answer. He said, a pacifist is to society what a celibate is to the church. they don't make sense in this life. He said, but they point to the next life. In heaven, there'll be no guns. That's a line you can take home. In heaven, there will be no guns. They point to that reality. Maybe we need guns down here. In heaven, there'll be no guns. And fifth, the prophet incarnates God's powerlessness. I gave you the Greek word exousia. In this world. Let me talk about that. If you read the Gospels in English, we get them, but we miss some of the finer nuanced parts. The Gospel is written in Greek. This is one place where, for all the effort I learned Greek to get my doctorate, it was worth it for this. And see, in English, we have the word, it appears here, we have the word power or authority. Jesus teaches with great power. He teaches with great authority. The scribes and Pharisees, they don't teach with great power. Okay, now, what's at stake here is this. In the Greek New Testament, there were 3 words for power, which are very different, and 2 of which we have English equivalents for. So one is the word energy. This person speaks with great energy. That's a power. Or just the energy of young, health, middle linebacker, football team, healthy. Okay, that's energy. It's power, physical power. And the second word we also have in English, which is the word dynamic. That somebody can be dynamic, a dynamic speaker, or a rock star on stage, just blows lights out. Now it's interesting, they don't use either of those 2 words about Jesus. They never say Jesus was energetic or he was dynamic. They use a word for which we have no English word. He speaks with great exousia. You don't have that word in English. You have the concept. Exousia is a certain powerlessness that's the final power. We don't have a word for the concept. You know who brings exousia into the room? A baby. You bring a baby into the room. The baby is absolutely powerless. In some sense, it's the most powerful person in the room. If you put a rock star and an athlete and a baby in a room, who has the most power? Ultimately, it's the baby. See, the baby can change a heart. It can soften hardness and so on. So Jesus he has great exousia. He brings a certain moral power. It can be very frustrating for us. Because it was for the disciples. They wanted a Messiah with a little bit of power. They for years they prayed for a Messiah, but they wanted a superstar who would come down here, and just laser all the bad in the world and break the back of the Romans and restore the kingdom. They got a baby in the stall. And as a prophet, you have to realize we're always working with God's underwhelming power. I was telling my students, the God we work for in this life, which is thoroughly underwhelming. Other powers overwhelm you. The quote that Father Michael gave you, it was bad is loud, and good is pervasive, and it lies in the corner like a baby. But eventually, it's going to win the day. Okay. Then, sixthly, a prophet articulates God's good news for the poor. Quite simply put this way. Scholars will tell you that. Social justice advocates will tell you that, and they're right. They say, any preaching of Jesus, any preaching of the gospel that isn't good news for the poor is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. You can take that. Any preaching, remember Jesus begins, I have come to bring good news to the poor. And so anytime we preach and the poor are getting in bad shape, it's not the gospel of Jesus. That isn't just social justice rhetoric. That's not social justice ideology. That's the heart of the gospel. If it's not for the poor, it's not from the gospel. It's not from Jesus. You used to have a very, I don't always tell around, a colorful pastor here in Forbes, Pastor Forbes at Riverside Church. Remember, he coined this famous line. He says, nobody gets to heaven without a letter of reference to the poor. We get can take that to the bank. Now, seventh, a prophet speaks out of the horizon of hope, not of wishful thinking or optimism. You know, we often confuse hope with two things it's not. Hope isn't wishful thinking. If you say, I hope I can win the lottery, that's not hope. You know, why? Because it's not based on anything. It's a pure wish. Okay? And hope also isn't natural optimism. So that someone says, you know, I always see the bright side of things. I think it's getting better. That's optimism. And that can be a pleasant temperamental thing, but it's nothing to do with hope. You can be a pessimist and be hope-filled. You can be an optimist and have no hope. Okay, what is hope? You know, it's very taken today when the Jesuit residents, Teilhard de Chardin used to live in this restaurant, in this residence, one of my mentors. But I want to tell you a story of hope from Teilhard de Chardin, great Jesuit. You know, as you know, Teilhard's work, he tried to take really the whole evolutionary science, the Big Bang, and just melt it with Scripture and show that everything is going to culminate with Jesus coming back as described in Ephesians 3, or 1, 3 to 10. So one day he's giving this talk. Oh, this is all developing. And someone says to him, well, that's an optimistic little schema. Said, suppose somebody blew up the world with an atomic bomb. Then what happens to this? Teilhard says, if we blow up the world with an atomic bomb, that'll be a 2 billion year setback. He said, but what I say is going to happen. It's not because I wish it. He said, but because God promised it. And in the resurrection, God showed that God has power to deliver on the promise. See, that's what. It's not based on wishful thinking. They just celebrated Easter. Easter is the foundation of the resurrection of Christ of everything. As Paul said, if it's true, it all makes sense. If it isn't true, we're the most deluded of all people. Which means we can get killed, the world will go. It doesn't matter in the end. It's going to, as Julian of Norwich says, in the end, all will be well, and every manner of being will be well. Which watched for a while at it, and if it isn't well, it's still not the end. None of you have ever woke up dead yet, and you never will. And see, hope is based on God's promise. Just a quick story of that. Some years ago, we had a young Oblate who is now a bishop in Quebec, Pierre-Olivier Tremblay, speaking at our school. He was still a young priest, and he was a chaplain at the University of Laval. He gave a very wonderful talk. He said, you know, I work with young people, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. He said, and they're full of life. They're full of energy. They're all this life. You know something? They don't have any hope. He said, they're full of life, but they don't have any hope. He said, because they don't have a meta narrative. They don't have a big story. They only have their own story. And so when the story's good, they feel good. When the story crashes, they crash. See, there's no... Teilhard de Chardin, we have a big narrative. Scripture is a big narrative. That's hope. And then number 8, the prophet doesn't just speak or write, the prophet acts. It acts with courage, even at the cost of death. You know, I said a prophet is a magus or a Sophia who can also act. Magus and Sophia, that's the masculine word and the feminine word for an elder, somebody who's wise, compassionate, a person to turn to. Okay. The struggle is that a lot of times those of us who are magi, who are Sophias, the trouble is oftentimes that we can't engage. Remember one of my professors once said, he says, you know, he said, when the last tree in North America has been cut down, academics are going to have written a whole lot of studies on why it shouldn't be done. But none of them will be on the technical. See, a prophet also knows when you pick up the placard and when you get yourself arrested. And then finally, a prophet can discern at which time to park the placard and bring on the basin of towel, and which time to bring on the basin of towel and park the placard. Okay. Now, those are principles for all prophecy. Now, we'll talk about what is quiet prophecy and what are its characteristics. Okay. And I'm not, if you notice here, I don't say privately, there's a time for it. There's a time for placards and there's a time for quiet prophecy. And when is the time for quiet prophecy? First one, a time to incarnate that the private deeply affects the social. The private deeply affects the social. You know, as a spiritual writer and as a priest and so on, this is one of the places where I really see our society losing ground. It's on this. And I don't think we get anymore just our internal and organic connection inside the body of Christ. You know, as Roman Catholics, as not just Roman Catholics, as Christians, if we take the body of Christ seriously, which is supposed to, there is no such a thing as a private act. Every act we do, whether it be for bad or for good, affects the whole body. You know, see, because as Paul says, we're one organism. You know, inside of a body, a cancerous cell affects the whole body. A healthy cell gives health to the whole body. And see, today I think we're losing that deep sense, you know, that you know, both for good and for bad. And when we do bad things, it's just my affair. No, it's not. You know, my infidelity affects everybody. The same as my virtue affects everybody. You know, probably the prime example of this is one of the one of the greatest saints of the last 200 years was President Emeritus, the little flower. You know, who died at age 24 and lived in the Zealand. When she died, she was probably known by less than 100 people who even realized she was alive. Okay. Today, she's a massive influence in the whole world. But Teresa's little way that's basically just, I'm an enzyme. I'm an enzyme inside the body of Christ. And when I do something, I want to bring health to the body. You know, see, so private prophecy. What we do in the privacy, this is key. What I do in the privacy of my life deeply affects the social. It's true for everybody. Like I said, that's a concept we're kind of losing today, where, you know, you want to see effect on the inside, but we're enzymes. We're cells inside the body. If I'm healthy, I'm helping the immune system of the whole body of Christ. If I'm unhealthy, unfaithful, I am doing cancerous stuff inside the body of Christ that affects. So not just what we do outside. Then secondly, and here's the image, a time for the base of the towel, for washing each other's feet, for making Eucharist outside the church. Let me give you a little background to this. If you notice on Holy Thursday, you go to church on Holy Thursday, which is the day we celebrate the institution of the Eucharist. And notice that they don't, when you read the Gospel, they don't read Matthew, Mark, or Luke's Last Supper. It's the Last Supper, Jesus took bread, took wine. We read John's Gospel, and John hasn't got any bread and wine there. He's based on the towel. What is that all about? You know, this. Okay. A little background to John's Gospel. You know, John's Gospel was written very late. It estimates somewhere between 90 and 100. So, if Jesus died in 33, Jesus has been dead for 70 years by this time. Okay? And if John himself wrote it, he'd have been a very old man in his 90s. Okay? And so it's interesting, the other Gospels, the Last Supper is one paragraph. In John's Gospel, it's over half of the entire Gospel is Jesus giving a speech. We've been reading it for the last 3 weeks in church. You know, it's all a farewell speech. You know? But it culminates with the washing of feet. I want to give you this text, just almost verbatim as it is in Scripture. John said, at the supper, Jesus, knowing that he had come from God, and knowing that he was going back to God, got up from the table, took off his outer garment, and began to wash his disciples' feet against their protest. He said, do this in memory of me. The same thing on the Gospel, bread and wine, do this in memory. What's the gesture? What's the gesture? Well, like everything else in Scripture, there's levels. And here we get the first level. And this is the level we've celebrated in our churches in terms of iconography, in terms of, you know, our statues and spirituality. And that is the master washing the disciples' feet. So we call it, this is servant leadership. The master washes the disciples' feet. And I've read some wonderful poetry on that. John Shea, the wonderful poet from Chicago, said at the Last Supper, Jesus took the mantle of privilege and turned it upside down and turned it into the apron of service. Took the mantle of privilege, turned it into the apron of service. That's the first level. There's a second level. And that's this. What Jesus is doing that time is crossing a major boundary. Masters didn't wash servants' feet. Okay. Now, what's the boundary? I want to briskly mention. I ask you this. It's an easy question to answer. In the United States today, what is the single most morally divisive issue in this culture? It's abortion. Pure and simple. Abortion is separating this country from the courts and the people, and it's not just separating bad people from good people, it's separating everybody from everybody. Now, you know what John would do if he came back today, the apostle? He'd say, let's not argue this. Let's not worry about Roe versus Wade and so on. Let's bring out a basement towel. Let's get pro-life to wash pro-choice's feet. Let's get pro-choice to wash the pro-life feet. Let's get Hillary Clinton to wash Donald Trump's feet. Let Donald Trump wash Hillary's feet. So then we might have some chance of having the Eucharist. See, that's what that gesture means. It's a powerful gesture. In fact, it's in John's Gospel, in the other Gospels where Jesus says, be compassionate, be perfect, the way your Heavenly Father's perfect. John puts it into a gesture. He makes it the Eucharist. This is what the Eucharist means. We have to be able to reach across. Let's get some Christians to wash some Muslim feet. Let's get some Muslims to wash some Christian feet. Let's get some feminists to wash some men's feet, some men to wash Gloria Steinem's feet. And how does he do this? There's a little, that's why I gave the text. There's a catch in that. He said, at the supper, Jesus, knowing he had come from God, he was going back to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe. It's not a throwaway line. What is his outer robe? Well, it's symbolic. What's my outer robe? He said, knowing that all things were possible for him. Tell you what my outer robe is. I'm a priest. I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm a Canadian. I'm white. I'm a male. I'm pro-life. You know what I have that robe on? There's certain people's feet I can't wash. If I take that robe off, then Jesus, I've come from God, and I'm going back to God. That's my deepest identity. And all things are possible for me. I can wash everybody's feet. But notice afterwards, he puts the robe back on. So it's not something you get rid of, But that's what Raymond Brown means. But sometimes you just have to park the placard and you pick up the basement towel and says, I'm an elder. I want to wash the feet of everybody. Okay, that's the role of an elder. The mother and father, they take care of the kids, and so on. And so just as a footnote, as a priest, I always used to hate that thing on Holy Thursday, because there's no aesthetic way of doing it. You wash feet. They're embarrassed, and we're embarrassed, and it's kind of sloppy, and people have their shoes off, you have this basin, and everybody's awkward with it, until one day I realized it's the whole purpose of the exercise. It's supposed to be awkward. There is no clean, simple way of doing this. It's supposed to be very awkward. And that's also the way they do Eucharist outside the church. And so I'll give a little footnote of that. For John doesn't connect the Eucharist so explicitly to the Last Supper as the other evangelists do. Because John connects to the daily feeding of the manna. Incidentally, as Roman Catholics, that's where our practice of daily Eucharist comes out in John's Gospel. Scholars suspect that John's community celebrated the Eucharist every day. The others didn't. Okay. Thirdly, a time to ponder, to carry attention. Okay. And here I want to use Mary. Okay. And I want to use one image. See, Scripture describes, during the New Testament, Mary is the one who ponders. The Annunciation, she ponders this. When they say your son's going to be killed, the sword's going to pierce, she ponders this. What does it mean to ponder? Okay. Now, this is very different than Greek. We think in Greek software. Custom Road Windows 400, we're still using it. A few upgrades, which so when we say ponder, in the Western, it means to think deep thoughts. It's not what it meant at all for the Hebrews. For a Hebrew, it meant to carry, hold, and transform tension. To carry, hold, and transform tension. So give me an example. Take an example. Mary under the cross of Jesus in John's Gospel. John says when Jesus was dying on the cross, his mother stood under his cross. Now, what was she doing under the cross? Well, she doesn't speak. She doesn't do any actions. But first of all, the verb said she stood. That's a position of strength. Sometimes artists or iconography have Mary prostrate under the cross. That's not good. Prostration is a sign of collapse. Standing is a sign of strength. Very strong under the cross. Well, what was she doing? Overtly, she wasn't doing anything. Notice, she's not protesting the crucifixion. She's not trying to stop the crucifixion. She's not even protesting her son's innocence. She's silent. Why? Okay. Quiet prophecy. She's doing the only thing that was possible to do in that hour. Remember, Jesus says, sometimes darkness just has its hour. There's nothing you do other than hold it, you know. Now, how could that be different? Imagine if Mary had been under the cross and she'd have gone hysterical. She'd just start shouting, "You're all horrible people. My son's innocent. You're terrible murderers." You know what she should have been doing? She should have been replicating the very energy that causes crucifixion and feeding it back. She was carrying that energy, transforming it, and not giving it back in kind. I'll give you a contemporary example. I live in Texas now. And in Texas, we still do executions. Did you ever go down to Huntsville, where they're doing an execution? Okay. There's very few people in the chamber where it's happening. There's people in the courtyard. Okay. And there's two kinds of protesters. Protest against each other. There will be people with banners and picket and say, "No, this is justice. This is finding closure for the family." There'll be other people with pickets saying, "We're just as much of a murderer as he is. We're murdering somebody." And off in the corner with the sister Helen Pray John, with a few Catholic sisters, they're not saying anything. They have lit candle and they're praying silently. They're saying, sometimes darkness just has its hour. Tonight we can't stop this crucifixion, but we can stop some of the anger, the tension, the bitterness by absorbing it. I want to give you an image of this. You know, in the New Testament, the Gospels, they have an image for the crowds. And when you read the Gospels, almost every time the word crowd is used, it's bad. It's pejorative. They use the word mindless. A mindless crowd. Okay? And then they use the word pondering. Okay? What's the difference? These are the images. Amazement is when you simply conduct energy. It's like an electrical cord. And what an electrical cord does, it simply conducts the energy that flows through it. Okay. Whatever goes in, goes out. And crowds do that, and we do that. Okay. Now, the opposite image is the image of a water purifier. I know it's a mechanical image, but it works. See, a water purifier takes inside itself water with impurities, with toxins, with poisons, with dirt. It holds all of that inside itself and gives you back just the pure water. You know, if you this is what ultimate prophecy is, pastors, women and men, adults. Today we're living in communities that are just full of tension of every kind. And the danger is to give it back. They're narrow-minded, he's an idiot, so see, we're just feeding the energy back. What we need today are water purifiers. That's quiet prophecy. You're inside your church communities, your civil communities, that are just full of tension, full of crucifixion energy. People today want to kill each other. They want to crucify each other. That energy has to be absorbed, you know, not given back. So, a little humor here. And when I was a young boy growing up, Catholics and I, we used to have to go to confession and confess bad thoughts. But against the sixth commandment, Father, I have bad thoughts. Now, today, all of us need to go to confession, but confess bad thoughts against the fifth commandment. The hardest commandment is not thou shalt not commit adultery. is thou shalt not kill. You know, we're always killing each other in thought, in judgment, and so on. You know, I have a lot of bad thoughts. And they keep getting worse as society gets more polarized, and so on. So, to ponder. Then, to weep over Jerusalem. It's interesting. Jesus goes into Jerusalem at one point of his ministry, and he is trying to give them a message of consolation, and they flat out reject him. Okay? So he leaves Jerusalem, sits outside of Jerusalem. What does he do? He said, he weeps over Jerusalem. He said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, only even know the hour of visitation. He's like a parent weeping over a wayward child. Okay? Now, again, that's quiet prophecy. What we need to do with our culture today, we need to weep over our culture. See, what Jesus is giving there is the opposite of our spontaneous reaction. What is our spontaneous reaction to rejection? Well, the hell with you too. You know, I did my best. You know, go fly a kite. You know, it all collapses. You know. See, that's our natural reaction. The discipleship, the prophetic reaction is weeping. It's those of you who are parents and grandparents, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, you know what that means. When your kids don't accept it and so on, you don't say, okay, you made your bed, now go lie in it. You weep. That's what love does. It's prophetic. And number 5, a time to give God's smile to the world, to be a divine grandparent. Okay. You know, anthropologists tell us this, and everybody I've ever checked it out with who's a grandparent says it's right. They say the purest love in the world is not the love we have in marriage, but the love we have with our own children, because in that there's always tension and angles and so on. The purest love in the world is the love that grandparents have for grandkids. And it's also the most joyful love in the world. And it's also the ultimate expression of sexuality. Sexuality is developmental, you know, from, you know, desire for intimacy, for generativity, for kids. The highest expression of sexuality in this world is not a couple making love. It's a grandparent looking at a grandkid and saying, God, you are wonderful. You are just wonderful. That's God looking at the original creation and saying, it's good, it's very good, and so on. So, as when we're not in the placard mode, we're in the washing towel, the prophetic thing is to give your smile to the world. You know, that sounds trite, it's not. To give your smile to the world. You know, I want to give you an image here from anthropology. And I grew up on a farm, so I've watched this. It's interesting when you watch a baby calf being born. You know, when a baby calf comes out of its mother's womb, it's completely constricted, it's paralyzed. It has a constricting afterbirth on it. And if something didn't happen, the calf would die paralyzed. But something happens. The mother gives birth to the child, she turns around, and in the next hour, 45 minutes, she licks with her tongue every inch of the glue off that calf's body. And when she's finished, the calf stands up, stretches his legs, begins to run with the sun. See, she's deconstricted the calf. Now, when we're born, there's a lot of psychological restrictions on us. And they are taken off by blessing. They are taken off by people blessing their energy. And oftentimes it doesn't happen. You know, I worked for years in men's groups where you have a lot of men who said, my father never blessed me. You know something? That's a wound they're carrying their whole life. There's a restriction in the heart. It's just free. Okay? And the way you bless somebody is not just, I bless your name, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. When you just admire young energy, the way grandparents treat it, you are just a beautiful kid. You know, it's a blessing that sets the young free. And it's really hard to do. You know why? Because the young are a threat to us. It's not a threat of your grandparents, but it's a threat of a young place. You know, and when it places so that, you know, if you could play your life back as a video, the time of a little kid to today, you would see just countless times energy stifled, not blessed. No wonder we have a lot of problems. But as you get a little older, I want to exit. I want to leave. I want to bless the young. I want to bless the young. It's the most single powerful thing you can do. And when I wrote the book, Sacred Fire, I was trying to say, what's mature Christian discipleship? And I built up and I said, the penultimate thing is to ponder, as Mary did. But the ultimate thing is to bless. It's our ultimate gift as adults, is to bless the world. Now, lastly, a time to leave a nurturing spirit, to speak a goodbye that leaves what matters most. Okay. And this is, we couldn't have a better time to do this than the time between Ascension and Pentecost. Okay. In the Gospels, it can be confusing when you read this, where Jesus is making that long Last Supper speech, and he keeps saying, it's better for you that I go away. He said, it's better for you that I go away, because if I don't go away, you can't receive the Holy Spirit. I have to go away, or you can't receive my Spirit. Then he said, and the Spirit I'm going to leave you is the Spirit of peace. I'm going to leave you peace. Okay, let's look at both of those. Why is it better for us that he goes away? Well, actually, that has many meanings to it. And many of you have experienced this. It has many simple meanings in our lives. There comes a time in teenage life where the child is 18, 19, 20. They say to them that it's better for you that I go away. Not just that my room is free. If I don't go away, I'll always be a little boy or a little girl in your house. I got to go away so I can come back to you as an adult. Jesus said, I have to go away or you're never going to get reading my voice. It's interesting. Notice while Jesus was alive, they didn't get him. They didn't get him. He died, said the Spirit, they got it. They got it. Now, this isn't just true for Jesus. That's also true for us. When you really understand somebody after they've died, it might take some months, it might take a year or two, and then their spirit is going to wash clean, from bad or from good. If it was a good person, you're going to have a spirit of peace, warmth, nurturing. If it was a bad person, say, my dad was awful bad, someone becomes clean. Okay. See, the spirit we leave behind. Quick story of that. I went to a funeral at our school, and I do have my eye on the clock here. Some years ago, and it was a funeral for a woman. I didn't know the woman, but I knew all of her adult children, and I knew her reputation. She was a woman who was known in San Antonio, basically, first of all, she was on these big-hearted people whose house was a hospitality center for everybody, from the mayor to the street people, to the street kids, to the dogs, and everybody could fit there. And she was also known for her faith. If there was a church door open, she was in it. Okay, she died. But the funeral was at our school. The chapel was full, top to bottom, bishops, priests, and so on, honoring this woman who deserved to be honored. She has 4 daughters. And at the end of the Mass, they gave an eulogy, 4 of them. And they had choreographed this. So the first daughter, her eulogy was basically what you have in the newspaper. Mom was born here, she met dad here, she went to school, this is what she did. The second daughter talked about hospitality. Her house was the center for San Antonio. Everybody ate here, the mayor, the street people, the kids, the dogs, she fed people. Third daughter talked about her faith. It's a church door open, Mom was in it. And the fourth daughter trumped it. She up and said, well, you're all here because you knew my mother. Or you think you did, but you don't. She said, we read all this stuff. She says, you think you know my mother? You don't. She said, but you will. She said, now I want to address to the kids, the grandkids, and to the rest of them, particularly the kids and grandkids. She says, your mother, grandmother, was an exceptional woman, human and spiritual. She said, and you think you know that, but you don't, but you will. She said, she's going to come to you in the next months, maybe in the next year or two. She'll come to you respecting who you are, respecting what you believe in, and you'll get her. You'll get her spirit. You'll know exactly what this woman meant, what she gave to you. nail the gospel any better. They got to Jesus. They thought they knew him when he died, and they kind of did, but mostly they didn't. The Spirit came and they got it. But it's also true for us. You know, and Jesus said the ultimate gift of belief is the gift of peace. You know, if you know me, you're going to know peace. Now that's also the gift we have to leave behind. You know, not just when we're dying, when we leave the room. Do we leave behind discord? Do we leave behind anger? Do we leave behind jealousy and judgments? Or do we leave behind peace? That's the great challenge. How are we going to, that's our real legacy. You know, your real funeral legacy is what did he accomplish? And he wrote these books, and he did this and so on. He was in church when he did all this stuff, you know. And you know, when we think of him, we leave confusion behind. No, that isn't just true. You know, when you leave a room, you leave behind a spirit, either a spirit of peace, or a spirit of discord, or a spirit of something, or a spirit of anger, you know. And so, quiet prophecies is to leave peace behind. I want to recommend first a story, then I'll recommend the book, and then I'll finish. You know, Morris West, the great Australian novelist, was a wonderful Christian. And Morris West published his autobiography when he was 75 years old. And it's a very mature book. A lot of autobiographies aren't mature, you know, my life up to now, or whatever. But West wrote this book called A View from the Edge. And these are the first words in the book. He said, when you turn 75, some of you still have some time to do this. When you get to be 75, he said, there should only be 3 phrases inside of your vocabulary. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He said, if that isn't your phrase, he said, you have a lot of it left. Just left here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, there's a wonderful book by a secular writer called Ira Burrock, and he's a doctor, but he works with dying patients in palliative care. And he says, my life's work is to go work with people in deathbed so that these can be the 4 significant things they say before they die. So you have to be able to say, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, then you next to cloud. The spirit we leave behind is going to be a care of peace, not of discord. No, if we leave behind the spirit of clinging, of jealousy, of bitterness, that's going to be your spirit. It's not going to be the Holy Spirit. It's going to be a different spirit. Okay, so those are some principles for quiet prophecy, and we have some time now, and Father Michael's going to decide when that time is over, but where you can ask some questions and interact with us.
So, is there any questions, comments, reflections for Father Ron or for the group?
Maybe objections as well.
Any objections? Jane?
Thank you. You have written about James Hillman, Father. And he's written a book called The
Force of Character.
And my question doesn't really relate so much to what we just so graciously heard, but he said that character precedes morality. And that interested me. The other thing that he said, and I didn't fully understand it yet, but he emphasized what we all take for granted, which is the indigenous and individualistic aspects that each of us develops during our lifetime. So that if you didn't have anything else, if you loved someone in your family or whatever, as the years went on, there was a method to what those years were representing as meaningful and important. Could you comment on that?
Okay, thanks. First of all, thank you for mentioning James Hillman. Let's tell you a little bit about James Hillman. James Hillman, which just died a couple years ago, south of St. Louis, Missouri, he was an agnostic, but ironically, probably wrote the deepest writings of soul that we have. You know, as an agnostic writer, he was the champion of soul. And the book you mentioned, The Force of Character, all these books and so on. And he also mentored the, not so young anymore, Thomas More, the author who's written all these things about character, soul, re-enchantment of soul. That's basically all out of Hillman and so on. First of all, let's think about character. So character precedes morality. He's right. You know, he's saying something is moral, not just on the basis of are you doing the right thing. You know, is it coming out of the right energy? So I'll give you an example of that. Take the older brother of the prodigal son in Luke 15. He is doing everything right, but it's all wrong. Notice, he's doing it out of bitterness, he's doing it out of anger, he's doing it out of, resentment, and so on. And see, so that he's got the right actions, he's got the wrong fuel, So Hillman says, and that pertains to something we said in this talk, that the private, the social, so sometimes we can be doing the right things, but it's still not right. And it's still not going to be prophetic, because it's not us. See, it's got to come out of character, Now, what was your second thing? If you can have the microphone again, just, I missed part of the second thing was the
what interested me was that I began to think about people that I've known and loved. For instance, my mother and my father. And I thought, instead of terms of religion or Catholic or anything besides how they actually behaved in life and how individualistic each person is in the way he or she drinks his coffee and how they decide to pay the bills, the ordinary things of life. And I think St. Francis de Sales said that the ordinary things we do have greater meaning than we know. And I was thinking of character like in a play. We're always talking about character. But in life, if we examine people in that way, or we look with interest in people that way, I think it's easier to be peaceful with them, because they will inevitably have, whether they're educated or not, they will inevitably have something different, something unique. And I think it's just a good way to create love, thinking about that.
Yeah, yes, and I agree. And I think, like about that's precisely what empathy is in its real sense. See, so that empathy doesn't mean you think the way I do, you be the same character I do, and so on. It's precisely to be able to appreciate, and say, your soul, which is unique, and which is going to showing your character and so on, and appreciate it for its uniqueness, not for its sameness, like my soul, or even that it fits a certain kind of normative character and so on. Just a powerful line. He wrote a book some years ago, which is a haunting book. It's called Gilbert, and he called it Suicide of the Soul. And Hillman said, he said in most suicides, you know what it is? He says, the soul isn't listened to, the soul will keep quiet. And then he makes quite a statement. He says, neither psychology nor the churches really get this. He said, psychology is always trying to fix the soul. The churches are trying to save the soul. He said, the soul needs neither to be fixed nor saved. It's already eternal. It has to be listened to. And see, so that, he said, to be able to really hear the individuality, the uniqueness of that soul. So, you got me going from a bit of a Hillman fan, as you can tell.
That's why I asked the question.
Plus, he was a very humorous, witty man.
Actually, you answered my question as to, because I read a little of his beliefs, and I kind of thought that Father Rolheiser was able to, not be judgment on terms of believing God, not believing God, but really to actually see things a little deeper as
Other questions, comments?
Pete, can you tell us about the school you're president of?
Pardon?
Can you tell us about the school you're president of?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to make the correction. I'm the ex-president. I'm President Emeritus, step down from that job. But I teach there full-time, work with doctoral students and a lot of this kind of stuff. Let me tell you about our school. We're a graduate school of theology and a seminary. We have over 100 seminarians, dioceses, and religious orders studying there. And we have about 100 other students. We also, in the United States right now, are the only school that has a PhD accredited in spirituality. And we have students from many different denominations. We have a very booming, probably just one of the strengths of our school is continuing education. We put through about 3,000 people a year, and interdenominationally. And so we just had an evangelical retreat on campus, and so on, with John Mark Homer. And on a little bit of bragging, when Daniel Berrigan, the great Jesuit, died, we were the first institution to have a national symposium on Henry's works. So one of our strengths is our MDiv program. We were founded as a seminary school, and we branched out. We also have a program in Black Studies, and you can get an MDiv or an MA in Black Studies. So it's and with all that bragging being said, we're struggling, as are all theological schools. Enrollment today in all schools, Protestant, Catholics, as there's church stuff is going down, less people in church. There's also less people preparing for ministry. That's also true of Protestant churches and so on. So we have less seminarians. And also, we have less lay students who are training for ministry because they're not sure they can get jobs. So we have a lot of people in continuing education and programs which are further enrichment and so on. And so my bragging set aside, but we're also struggling. So send us some students. Do you have a question back there? And thanks for asking me to give me a chance to talk about Oblate School of Theology.
I've been fascinated by your description of what makes a wide and accepted prophet. And I'm concerned as to why today at the leadership level, there's so few that come up with the description needed to be a good prophet. Why is it so far?
Now, when you talk leadership, church leadership, society leadership, government, which leadership?
Leadership?
Yeah. But are you talking about church leadership or civic leadership? Or both?
It would seem to me that you cannot be the kind of leader we would want to have if there is no moral backbone, no strength behind the person who is trying to be our prophet.
Yeah, you're right. But with one qualification. Remember those first 6 things I gave you. You can have somebody who's a strong leader, a lot of backbone, but if they're not coming out of the gospel, or they're not being grounded in something beyond political ideology or ecclesial ideology, it's not going to be prophetic. It's going to be another ideology. Because there's also ecclesial ideology. It's not just Greenpeace and feminism and all of this stuff. There's just a lot of ecclesial ideologies. And I think it was sympathy. It's very, very hard to, it's going to sound funny, it's very, very hard to be sincere. Doesn't that sound like a contradiction? It's hard to be sincere. Sincere comes from 2 Latin words, sine cera, means without any wax. And what I mean by that is, it's very hard in our society because we're just inhaling ideologies all the time, okay, to really know what you think. Sometimes if someone says, what do you think about that? An honest question, I really don't know. I know what I think I'm thinking. So I'll give you an example. Back in 2005, Mel Gibson came out with this movie, The Passion of Christ. And it was so talked about, it was a powerful picture, but anyway, the conservatives said, this is the best thing ever done on the Passion of Christ. This is it. And liberal thinking was saying, this is horrible. He said, almost violent pornography and so on. And I wondered, I'm convinced that when we watch the picture, we watched each other watch the picture. And we react to it. A lot of times we're not watching the news, we're watching each other unconsciously watching the news. Whether it's Fox or CNN or whatever, and we're just reacting unconsciously to each other. And if someone says, what do you think? You'd say, I really don't know. I think I know what I'm supposed to be thinking, or it's really hard to be sincere. It's hard to be free of ideology. That's also true ecclesially. Richard Rohr has a great image. Richard Rohr said, if you're sliding down a roof, it doesn't matter which side you're sliding down. You're getting further from the center. And today, just the left and right are just sliding down roofs. And so it's so hard. And you see it politically. So instance, you see it in spades, and you watch the news at night, in this country, but all over, just right up to just ever more polarized, ever further and further apart from extreme positions, that it's impossible to even have a discussion. For instance, abortion. Charles Mosey's a wonderful theologian in Florida. I want to find out on abortion, and he said, the researchers, he said, about 85% of Americans would actually agree on abortion, but they'll never get to talk. It's the 15% that just polarized this where it's absolutely beyond discussion. And if you're in the 85%, you say, I don't even want to think. Are you reacting to abortion? Or are you reacting to Donald Trump? Or are you reacting to this? Or feminism? Whatever. See, that's why I say it's really hard to be sincere. It's just saying, what do I really think? What's my real position on this? And so on. And the ideologies aren't just out there in politics. They're also ecclesial ideologies. Are you Pope Francis? Are you against Pope Francis? And all this. I know some people, seminarians, on their doors, they put Francis free zone. That's an ideology, or vice versa. A young friend, a wonderful theologian in Canada, and so on, and she says that I define myself on the edges. Well, that's very dangerous. You might be on the edges, but don't self-define. See, as soon as I say, well, I'm a liberal theologian, I'm a conservative theologian, I'm somebody on the edges. See, the self-defining almost immediately puts you into an ideology. Jim Wallace always says, I'm for Jesus. And it's interesting, Jim Wallace, it sounds simplistic, he's not one of the most bright people writing today, but he says, don't go right, don't go left, just go deeper, and just go wherever Jesus takes you. And he says, if you read Scripture, which is true, and if I read the Gospels and tell me whether Jesus was liberal or conservative, he's both. And from page to page, it flips back and forth. He was for the poor, he was for his father, and sometimes he took him here, sometimes he took him there. And most of the time, we're trapped. I gotta go here. We love it Paul. Which is true, but oftentimes we're leaving the church. We're playing to a certain base. And I say the sympathy, I'm not free of that. It's just so hard. I work in an academic situation. When you work with academics, they're poised to just jump on anything. You sneeze wrong, and politically incorrectly, they kill you, So, it's important to recognize that. And that's why it's also hard to be a leader. It's really hard to be a leader. I think Pope Francis is trying, but now I'm going to date myself. Whom I really, really admired as a leader was Pope Paul VI. Pope Paul VI took over the church at just a really critical time after Vatican II, and things were. And you know what he was? He was the Italian father who kept the family together. He oftentimes didn't like this, we're doing that, and it was this Italian father suffering, keeping the family together. He was a good leader. And he said some prophetic things, and he said prophetic things both ways. He wrote Humani Vitae, which got the liberals all upset. Okay, the conservatives, that's our man. But the year before, he had written Progressive Popular, which no conservative has ever taken seriously. One of the most far-reaching social doctrines ever written. I remember once challenging a woman. She was talking about, why do you want Humani Vitae? I said, what about Progressive Popular? I said, I was only 2 years old when that came out. So you're only 1 year old when the other one came out. They came out a year apart. But see, Paul VI, he was an Italian father, parent, trying to keep the family together. And he did. But he was pretty ideologically. Rome, I visited Paul VI. He's my Pope.
You've given us a lot to think about. You have spoken on the peace that comes from following the Lord, following Jesus, this tension between the Ascension and Pentecost, joy and hope, and your own character and your own being is peaceful. It sends off a wonderful, peaceful sense to all of us. Thank you very much for being here.